doesn't mean much because there's hundreds of countries. So what I did instead, apart from challenging that, is I tried to look at ways that there are actually commonalities. And I was looking at narratives and compositions. That was the trajectory that set what was my PhD research, which is not this, but this emerged out of it, because this is the first artwork I presented since then. And what I became very interested in was not just the Asia-Pacific region, but the nature of cross-cultural dialogue itself. So not the idea of I say something about my culture, and then you say something about your culture, and then we learn. The idea that there is no way that either party could possibly learn about each other's culture in an objective way, but it's an experience of sharing and reciprocity and confusion and mistranslation and concepts that are incommensurate between different positions. And it is more just the fact that people are sharing and being open and engaging in cross-cultural dialogue is the important part, not really what is happening. So this is sort of a myth-making image that is like a banner, because we're looking at the idea that, if anyone's read the statement, it's looking at paper and textiles as mechanisms for colonial influence. So I've made a little flag. I'm usually an oil painter, so this is very different for me. Without being very literal and just explaining what's on the image, it's about this duality between two figures. One doesn't represent East and one doesn't represent West, but it's the idea that there is this dominant way of looking at history that is the duality of East versus West. So I'm not assigning one, neither either, but around them and engulfing them is a series of little micro narratives that actually, if you look hard enough, they contradict what's happening in the center. So it's the idea that if we keep reinscribing the East-West binary, we'll only keep interpreting history in exactly the same way. It's the idea that there's lots of individual stories and personal narratives that are much more meaningful but get lost because it's very easy to say this party interacted with this party and there's just two groups. So that's a very small part of it. There is a third aspect to it, which is that towards the end of my PhD research, which one of its aims was about critical self-reflection, I was a designer before I was an artist for years, and I realized that my cultural influence was not going to art galleries, it was playing video games for decades. So I started to introduce video game narrative telling devices into my work. So, for example, things like health bars, icons. So that's part of the contradiction and the misalignment and the mistranslation as well, is that you might see something in the image, but there are these video game storytelling elements that will not corroborate. So the story is confusing on another layer as well. So I'll stop there because I can keep talking for a long time, but yeah. Do you want to go next?